Have you started teaching dialogue to your students yet? Dialogue is such a great way to bring life to a story. So if you are teaching creative writing, personal narratives, fantasy stories, you will want to include dialogue. But how do you teach it? Welcome to Sarah's Writing Spot. I'm Sarah, and today we're going to talk about the types of writing that have dialogue, why it's important to include, and a fun lesson idea to practice with your kids. First of all, what type of writing uses dialogue? We teach our kids lots of different types of writing throughout the year. It might be the just regular one paragraph or a 5-paragraph essay, depending on their age. You've got letter writing, how-to writing, but not all of those obviously use dialogue. So which types of writing are we thinking about when we talk about dialogue? So the two main ones covered in elementary school are narrative writing and two types of narrative writing. You've got the personal narrative, which is a story based on something that's happened to you in your life. And then you have the fantasy story, which is completely made up and has magical elements in it. Both of these, you really want to include dialogue. Now, usually what I do is I teach dialogue before we even start writing a story. I want students to be confident in their ability to use dialogue and know how to punctuate it. So I usually do a mini lesson or two before we even start writing, just so they know that they should include it and how to include it. So why use dialogue in our writing? Why not just throw in some feelings and some action and let it be that? Well, dialogue really helps to spice up your story. It really brings it alive, gives it a personality. I always tell students that the three things that we always want to have in our story is action, feelings, and dialogue. And we should be kind of rotating and sprinkling those throughout the story. And so dialogue, as you can see, is one of those very important parts. Sometimes when I introduce narrative writing, I'll dress up like a chef, get my bowl and some ingredients, and talk about how a great story has a little bit of each one of those. So it's always fun to bring food into the classroom. So that's a fun idea you can do to help get kids excited. Now, let's talk about the basic rules of dialogue. Like I said, I like to teach it before kids even start writing a story. I want them to feel good about using it the right way, and then there's less editing in the end because they've already done it right the first time. So it's a little different depending on ages. So if your kids are 2nd to 3rd grade, really the only things I really want the kids to be using are the quotation marks around the speaking part. We want them to know that whenever a person or character is speaking, whatever's coming out of their mouth should be in quotation marks. That's the most important thing. Now, if they really have a handle on that, we'll also talk about how that first letter should have a capital letter. It's kind of like a sentence inside those quotes. Sometimes I say those quotes are hugging that sentence inside. And so you want to make sure it has all the same elements of a good sentence. A capital letter at the beginning. Now at the end, it can get a little tricky because you can have an exclamation point, a question mark. The tricky part is can't always have a period. Sometimes we have to use a comma if there's an extra tag on the end. But overall, I really just like to stick with the quotes, making sure my 2nd and 3rd graders know to put quotes when a character is speaking. Now, if you are teaching 4th graders or older, you got to get a little bit more detailed. And there really is a lot to learn about dialogue. There's a lot of little intricacies and rules to teach. And so usually when I start teaching that with my older students, I usually grab a chapter book. I really like using the I Survive books because they're really engaging and interesting, and they have a lot of dialogue mixed with action and feelings inside. It's really good, easy to open up a page and use one as an example. And I usually screen share it with my students, and we go through just one page and look at the different dialogue, and we'll circle and highlight different parts and really analyze it and try to recognize what some of the rules are. And I usually have my students try to sort of identify and tell me what those rules are first before we go over them together. So and that way they pay more attention, because it makes it authentic and real. If you're looking at a real author's piece of work, maybe they'll start noticing it in their own reading when they're reading a chapter book. So some of the things that I really want my fourth graders and older to practice is still the quotes. We still want to do the capital letter at the beginning. We do want to start paying attention to that punctuation at the end, whether it's an exclamation point, comma, or question mark. Start talking about that tag at the end, like she said or he said. And even talking about better words than said, like shouted, yelled, exclaimed. And then there's that period on the very end. That can be confusing for kids, because they're like, didn't I just use punctuation inside the quotes? I got to use it again, end punctuation again. So that can be tricky for them to remember that, yes, there might be two end punctuation marks there. All right, so let's talk a little bit about now a lesson that you can do to make it fun and interesting and exciting for your students to practice. And so one thing I love to do is I love to go on the internet, find a really funny picture or interesting picture, but it has to have at least two animals or two people in the picture. Because the activity that I do is I show students the picture, I flash it up and tell them that we want to make up a fake conversation between these characters in the picture. So in this case, if I flashed this picture up, I'd say, write a conversation between these two chipmunks. Now, I always model first. So in this case, I might do it together as a class or as a group, and we can take turns coming up with ideas of what they might be saying to each other. And then after we practice as a class, then I might put some pictures up for students to practice on their own by themselves and share with a partner or share out with a class. So here is an example of how you might use that chipmunk picture. So I have one chipmunk saying, "Would you like some more tea, Alvin?" Simon asked. Get it? Like the chipmunks, right? "That would be splendid," Alvin replied. "Here you go," Simon squeaked. And so the students have a chance to even practice alternating lines and dropping down to a new space as the speakers change. And that's important to learn how to do that as well. So give these a try. It's a lot of fun, and it's a great way to have kids practice their dialogue punctuation. Thank you for joining me today. I hope you found these tips useful for teaching dialogue at home or in school, wherever you teach with your upper elementary school students. If you found this video helpful, I would love a thumbs up, or you could share it with a friend if you think they could use these tips too. As always, I hope you have an awesome day and happy writing.